All right, so I think we'll get started. My name is Candace Cosgriff. I'm the program coordinator with AFOA BC. I'm here to help Joanne just monitor the chat and everything. We'll be doing a question and answer at the end. So along the way, any questions you may have, just put them in the chat box and I'll help her monitor that towards the end. We'll be keeping your mics muted until the end of questions, so you can either ask your questions in the chat or raise your hand and ask them out loud. And with that, this is Joanne Contant. She's a CPA, CGA, and CAFM, and she works as a workshop facilitator with AFOA Canada.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I can't see everybody's face, but I see some names. Perhaps I know some of you, I'm not sure. I do other types of facilitation for the AFOA, so I may have met you before. If so, just say hello in the chat line. So today I'm here to cover sort of a trailer, a teaser for the project management for large infrastructures. And that is a 2-day workshop. And in the next hour, we're going to review what this workshop entails. So I will now move on to my PowerPoint and share that with you. I wouldn't mind hearing just a quick word from everyone, just like hello and any interest, or is your organization opening or working on a large project or foresee one coming into the future? So I know they muted you all, but I hate just talking to a camera. I want to have a little bit of chatting with everyone. So and I can see names, so if you don't mind, I will just call out your name. You don't have to have your camera on, just unmute yourself, tell me your name and any knowledge or interest in large project management. So sorry, Candace, for throwing this at you I just thought I can't just talk to a camera. So I'm going to start with Cheryl. Maybe I move on to Lise Steele. Am I having technical difficulties here?
I'm not sure. Maybe also if you're trying to introduce yourself and speaking, your mic still be muted. So just double check that.
Okay, I see Roy. Roy, can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm fairly new to my position here. I'm less than a year, but I started off in human resource management and then I moved over to economic development, and I'm the implementation manager now. In our capital committee, we talked about trying to upgrade our Stein water system. Right now, it's pretty much at max. So we're looking at developing a 99 lot subdivision in like the 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile area. It's already, the system's already at capacity, and also our septic fields are starting to fail. So we're looking at getting a water and wastewater treatment plant and upgrading our water system and trying to develop a daycare center in the same area as our school and health clinic. So there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades that are needed. And like I said, I'm just about pretty much 4 months into this job now. So got a lot of I have like little workshop trainings for project management. So really looking forward to a little more input in how to manage these bigger projects.
Thanks. And that is a lot of different projects definitely on the go there. Thank you. Eddie, Eddie?
Good morning, Ed Vistrasol. I'm a support tech with the First Nation Land Management Resource Center in the Manitoba region. I just interested because we have about 500 additions to reserve under TLE land claims process here. About half of the 64 communities in Manitoba are entitled to lands. So a lot of them, like we have communities that have 100 reserves, right? My community has, when they get all the land, they'll have about 40 reserves to manage. So one of the big things going on in Manitoba now is, I don't know if you've heard in the news, maybe even national news, Cap Young Barracks, the Treaty 1, 7 Treaty 1 First Nations are developing land that used to be former Army barracks, smack dab in the middle of the city of Winnipeg. So that's a huge, it's a huge infrastructure project, right? And it's a huge opportunity for those 7 communities, 4 of which are land code communities. So, so I was just interested in poking in and listening. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Interesting. Jason.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Ellis. I'm the comptroller for Seabird Island Band in Agassiz, British Columbia. So I think this workshop will definitely assist us maneuvering through the complexity of capital projects. Some of the projects we have on the go is a cultural center. That's some provincial dollars, obviously IS projects, and also BC housing. So I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Mike? In case there's more than one, Mike Mitchell. Or any Mike.
Well, hi, hello. My name is Michael. A burial. I'm not sure which my name is there for, but hello, good morning. I'm actually just a second year employee of Indigenous Services Canada, so I'm helping with actually infrastructure and economic development grant programs. So I think this would be a really great opportunity to get some of your guys's, like the AFOA as well as First Nations ideas, so I can kind of understand a little bit better the economic development field and be able to kind of assess and help infrastructure projects a little bit better. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more on that. Thank you. And
thanks. Mike Mitchell.
Good morning. My name is Mike Mitchell. I also work with Seabird Island Band. I'm the assistant controller, and similar to what Jason had said, we have a lot of projects on the go, and I thought this would be a good workshop to come to and gain some more experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica? How about Robin? Robin McKay? Cheryl Bryce? Lisa Steele, or Lise Steele, I should say. Well, I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties. I'm not hearing from anyone I'm calling out. So
I seem to be hearing you okay. I don't know if it's just wanted to let you know.
Go ahead. Say hello and
Oh, okay. My name is Francine Douglas. I'm the Indigenous Tourism Specialist with Indigenous Tourism BC, and it's a shared position with the Vancouver Coast and Mountains Tourism Region, which is kind of from the Salish Sea up to the Lilwat area, and I'm here just to listen and learn. Thank you.
thanks. Does anybody else? I kind of got lost in my little list. I have a Cheryl, a Danielle, a Robin. Anybody want to introduce themselves and tell me if any interest in this workshop?
Hi, I can go. My name's Danielle Lane. I'm a support technician with the Resource Center, and I'm based out of New Brunswick. I guess I just wanted to participate, again, just to listen and learn. But I guess also maybe to talk about ideas or, you know, just best practices. I know in my community, when I think about infrastructure, there was recently some water line breaks, and they were looking at the old infrastructure, and I mean old, like in the old part of our reserve. So, you know, 50, 60, 70 years old, and, you know, they didn't have adequate, I guess, placement of where the infrastructure was. So it was kind of like a dig and guess, like, we think it's here, dig, nope, not there, dig, you know what I mean? So just really how to bring that infrastructure up to kind of, you know, something that we know where it is, and then, you know, best practices moving forward with our future infrastructure. You know, I think that stuff is pretty good, but just, I guess, the maybe lack of information for old infrastructure or identification of where it was. So I guess that's kind of where I wanted to sit in on this infrastructure session. So thanks.
Thanks, Danielle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here unless someone else wants to introduce themselves. I got a gist of people's, you know, their concerns and what they're looking for. So that kind of gives me an idea. And what I'll do is I'll start the PowerPoint and we'll go through it. And then please feel free to use the chat, and I'll be notified when you have a question, and I'm more than happy to answer that at the time. And then if not, we can have a discussion afterwards. So I'm glad to hear there's people from across Canada. So because we're all unique and we all have different needs. So it's an interesting group. So I'm going to share my screen and start with the PowerPoint. So today we're just looking at the overview of this 2-day workshop. So I can't obviously go into too much details, but when we're done, you'll have an idea of what this will entail. So I usually like doing introductions. Obviously, I would have done, if this is the actual workshop, we'd go around the table and everybody would do introductions. I also will be covering a bit about the background of this workshop, how it came to be. We're also going to look at examples of large infrastructure projects. We're going to look at the learning objectives, look at how this workshop is structured and what sort of tools we'll provide you with, and the topics we're going to cover, and some pitfalls to avoid. And these pitfalls really are you know, things that we're covering in the workshop. So how this came about is this was, I don't know how many years ago, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, the Quebec region designed a 2-day workshop for their the communities in their province. And they looked at, you know, different needs that they saw perhaps the First Nations needed or could use more information on, and develop this 2-day workshop. And the AFOA has, with the help of ISC Quebec region, took this workshop and we kind of, you know, tweaked it for our purposes. And this workshop is for infrastructure projects that are more than $1.5 million. But the tips, the process, the steps apply to a project that would just be $1 million or even 800,000. So it's designed for 1.5 and over, but don't feel that this, if your project is less than that, this information will not, will definitely apply to it. They also designed a Excel spreadsheet because some of the First Nations didn't really have a system to keep track of their budget. So that is provided with the workshop, and we go over that as well. The other thing that we will look at is the ISC tendering policy. So again, depending on the price of the job, there's a policy to follow. If it's like a public tender or if you could go private. So again, to me, whether your project is 30 million or 800,000, this policy and this information about the procurement part is quite useful. And the other thing I want to tell you about this workshop is that it is a general contracting approach, meaning you, the First Nation or the organization, is not the construction company. So we are hiring engineers. We, you know, we're putting out RFPs for the construction people to do that. So we, as in the organization or First Nation, are only looking at this from a contractor's position. So it doesn't mean, for example, that your, you know, public works, if they have a lot of the First Nations I work with, public works, sometimes we have a gravel pit. I mean, we'll do, and if we have a big project, we're not the actual people doing the construction. We hire the people to do that, but we often use our own manpower and resources if we have them. So it doesn't mean that we don't play a role in it. It just means that we're not doing the construction from, you know, putting in the nails and hammering away. So so it's from a general contracting approach. And also, the other thing that this workshop covers is that there are many factors that can affect the timeline of a project. And these are the ones that are out of our control. So it could be natural disasters, lack of remote First Nations that there's, you know, it's hard to get to. It could be the climate, weather condition, access to inventory. And as we all know now, I know I'm talking to a lot of people in BC, but here in Ontario, the wood, the lumber has tripled, and we have shortages of many things. So right now with this pandemic, there are a lot of challenges if you are in the midst of a project or about to begin with one. So the ISK Quebec region looked at all these, you know, issues or potential factors that were affecting timeline. And one of them was the capacity of some First Nations. So that is another reason why this workshop was developed. So when we say large infrastructure, you know, not the obvious one, but the common one, I should say, is, you know, we're thinking water treatment plants. And personally, I think a building, but then it does not just boil down to do those two examples. My first example is Shoal Lake 40. They were remote. They had to go by boat and to, you know, to the First Nation to get supplies and so forth. And a lot of the First Nations I work for are also on islands in Ontario. So they have ferries, and we have winter here. So we have issues with ice, and, you know, there is a time in the winter that you can drive on the ice, but not all islands, the water is safe to do so. So this example here, they built, they constructed a road, and it's called Freedom Road, which is an appropriate name, and it was completed in 2019. And this road was an agreement between the province, Winnipeg, and ISK. So most of the projects and what this covers, this workshop, is a project with ISK, but sometimes, and I think someone mentioned that at the beginning, where you're going to be working with other parties, so it could be the province or a city. So, and I personally have worked where it was 3 of us, the feds, the province, and us. So a third each into the project. But most of this, as I said, is related to ISK. So when we're looking at large infrastructure projects, we could be looking at a road, as was done here. I know one of the First Nations I've worked with here in Ontario, they are looking at building a bridge to the mainland, because after decades or, you know, of traveling by ferry, through, you know, winter and everything, it's not an easy thing. And when the ferry breaks, it delays services and even the ambulance system and everything. So, so it could be a bridge, it could be a road. My other example here is Horse Lake First Nation, and it's a water treatment plant. So that is a common one that is being done at this time. Another one is Fishing Lake First Nation School. This is a school, high-tech school that was built in Saskatchewan, and it was $30 million construction, and it was through ISK. Looking at this workshop, we're looking at any type of construction per se, from a contracting approach and with funding from ISK. So these are the learning objectives in the workshop. So we're going to look at various documents to produce that are produced during the different phases. We look at the roles and responsibility of a project manager and understanding funding arrangements as well. So the document part is really interesting now, because we look at the forms and so forth, but we're also now looking at how we're adapting to this pandemic and how things now, like find little tiny details. If you were paper-based, as we were, I am the CFO of Wata Mohawks in Central Ontario, and we were very paper-based office, and we've been working from home remotely, and now we're electronic, and we've had to adapt. So, you know, even though the pandemic has not been a positive thing, there has been things that forced us to kind of move forward. So when we're looking at all the different documents and storing and all that in those 2 days, we also get to discuss how to adapt in a pandemic. The second one is the roles and responsibility of a project manager, and the big emphasis on the 2 days is the project manager, and that is someone that you will elect in your First Nation or organization. You may hire a project manager, but even if you did, you need someone in your organization that is the key person that is on top of it and managing this project. So a lot of it is spent on the responsibilities of a project manager. And then we look at funding arrangement. Now, because I'm an accountant, I'm familiar with agreements and agreement letters and so forth, but often staff are not as familiar. So we kind of go over some of the paperwork that involves agreements and what a letter is and so forth. We also look at the tendering process, as I mentioned earlier, and if it's funded by ISC, there is a policy, and we review that policy and apply it in examples and look at it. So again, even if it's not 1.5, it's still useful information. If you don't have a policy in place for tendering, at least you get a base for your policy. We look at what a holdback is, how to get how to request payment from IF once the project is started, what the process is for payments and so forth, and how to ensure that you're complying to ISC requirements, which are very similar to your audit, to your council, to your board, making sure that you're meeting everything that the agreement specifies. So the workshop structure is based on a bit of presentation, some discussion, and group assignments. And these group assignments, it allows the participants to share their experience and knowledge. And as I heard from this group, we have people from different places. When I do this workshop or any other one, it's usually always interesting because sometimes it's very First Nation specific and I have a group from the same place, but most of the time I don't, and we learn from each other. I'm always learning from everybody because we all have different experience and knowledge. So as much as the 2 days I'm doing a lot of talking, there is definitely time for group discussion while they're doing their assignment and people learning from other people. What we do is we have a fictitious project. It's a water treatment plant that we look at on the first morning, and we work with that fake project through the 2 days. So it allows the participant to see it through on like large steps. So it's not detailed, but it gives you an idea of the different steps till the end. There will be 4 group assignments a day. Again, you're working in small groups. The groups always change, so you get to meet and learn from others. Questions and sharing is always encouraged throughout the day as well. We all, I was God, I blanked out here. I was a college instructor teaching bookkeeping and accounting and business courses for years. And usually when you get students, they're all fresh out of high school and they, you know, basically are all the same. With experience and knowledge, a few of them had summer jobs and so forth. When I do these workshops, the experience and the knowledge varies from person to person, and it makes it a little more interesting than just teaching at the college, because every First Nation's unique, different cultural, different culture, different terrain that everybody lives on, different resources, landscape. So everybody has different perspective as well. So we learn from each other. And I think that's what really makes these workshops really, really worthwhile, is that the sharing. And it's just like anything else. You may have had a project that, you know, went well, and you hear something else from someone else, and it gives you that information for the future. Like, we learn from each other. So next time we're doing a project, now we've learned that, hey, this could happen. So let's put our ducks in a row to avoid that. Some of the working tools that you'll be able to leave with is we're going to look at ways to track time. And we really do spend a lot of time on, like, we look at the stages of a project. We look at the importance, the big importance of keeping our documents filed, and what to keep and how and where and all the details like that. And then we also really spend time on looking at different ways to track time. So again, different methods, different people. I know for like a simple one is just having a whiteboard in your office with, you know, the timeline of a project, whereas you might also have it on your computer in a different format, but just different tips we're going to talk about. And the budget, same thing. Excel, you will be provided with an Excel that was developed by the Quebec region. And it's a way of tracking the, inputting the budget of your project and inputting the work as the stages progress. And it also populates some data such as holdbacks, which is something we talk about. And this spreadsheet, when you put your amount, automatically will calculate the holdback. So for those who have nothing in place, this is a great tool. A very few First Nations that I know of have actual software that does project management. It's expensive, it's complex, and you have to be doing a lot of projects to make it worthwhile. I think this Excel is a good tool to use if you don't have anything. Most people rely on their accounting software, which is fine, but you also want something else. And again, we look at that because there's timing issues. And again, we're going to talk about in the workshop the difference between what's in the general ledger and how you need to keep in Excel or some other way accurate, up-to-date information. So as I mentioned earlier, we look at, it's from a general contracting position. Many, most First Nation are not in the construction business, but it does not mean that they're not going to hire perhaps local construction companies on the First Nation. So again, we look at that as well. We also look at if you are hiring a construction company to have perhaps an Indigenous percentage or amount component in the contract that they for labor. So we kind of look at all that sort of ways to also provide employment to community members. And we're going to look at the key role players and their roles in a project. So as I mentioned earlier, the big one is the project manager, and that's someone in your First Nation that is on top of everything. And you can have a committee. And I've worked on a large First Nation where we built state-of-the-art fire department. If anyone's familiar with Ontario, Central Ontario, this was Rama. This was for the Casino Rama. So once that casino went up, at the beginning, there was 13,000 people per day visiting the casino. So obviously the services had to be upgraded for the amount of people. So the fire department was constructed, and we had happened to have a couple of engineers on staff and a couple of accountants, and we composed, so we had a project manager, and we then have a team, and we would meet quite frequently. Again, it'll depend on the size of your First Nation and what the project is, but you should always have a clear plan of who's in charge of what, and you have to have one person in charge. So that, again, over the next 2 days is really stressed upon what their role is, what to expect, and so forth. And again, if the capacity is not there, you can outsource this, but someone internally still needs to be in charge so that they're making sure things are being done as they should. We look at all the managing aspects of a project. We look at the various steps, stages, and how to start a project. So the beginning, the important thing is getting commitment, and that is commitment from council. If you're in a First Nation, if you're in an organization, it's your board. And to get commitment as well from whoever you elect as your project manager, project team, and to ensure that that continues to be, the commitment is always looked at to make sure that it doesn't start to fail simply because priorities have changed and you've moved on. So we really look at that and the different stages. And then we look at what they call the project brief. And that is a brief that you will have between you and ISK, because this is, you're doing a project with the assumption that obviously you're getting funding from ISK, and they will be expecting this project brief. So we're going to look at what is a project brief, what the components in it, and how it's a living document that it constantly changes and you keep adding. So it's, to me, as an accountant, it's very similar to a business case or a business plan, in a sense that it breaks down, you know, what's the scope, and then it has its supporting components like the financial one, the budgets. It has the technical component. It has, just like a business plan, if you were writing a business plan, you'd explain who the owners are, what their experience is, or you even have a section in the project brief for who is the project manager, and if there's a team, who are they, and so forth. So we really work with the project brief over the 2 days as we go through the stages. Oops, sorry. Again, we're looking at the process with Indigenous Services. Often, as mentioned earlier, and that I've said myself, that I've worked on projects where the province is also involved, but we're looking at if it's just ISK. So we're going to look at the ISK forms and what it is that they're kind of a sample of what they could look like. They may not be identical because each region might have their own little forms, and they may vary from province to province, but the main information still remains. So we look at different forms. And again, with the ISK, we look at the tendering policy as well. So we're really focused on ISK, and it doesn't mean that it could not be a project where you have the province or a city involved. And if that's the case, the reporting might be different, but again, that will be known to you when the agreement and how the reporting shall take place. So for example, I did one on water, water study, and it was, as I mentioned, the federal, province, and ourselves. And how it all worked out was I had to go on a website, a provincial website, and input the information and upload invoices and so forth. And the province would reimburse us for their 1/3, their share, as well as the federal government. So what we're covering here are not all the aspects, but it really doesn't change that much. It's just the how and different perhaps forms or websites. We look at what holdbacks are. We look at how to get your payments to reimburse your engineers, your construction companies, and so forth. And the second bullet here is super important for many of the First Nations that I have facilitated this workshop for, where they have a very tight cash flow. They cannot just pay, $90,000 construction installment and then submit to the government and then get reimbursed. They need the money up front to pay. And so that's again, for many First Nation, this is the important part for them, that they want to make sure they understand the process so that they submit on time, so they get the money on time to pay. Many of my other First Nations that I've worked with with this workshop is different. They have their own source funding, so they're not as concerned, about remitting and getting reimbursement from ISK. But there's no reason, again, to not do this ahead of time and not use your own funding as well. So, and then we look at what change orders are. And again, we spent some time on that and look at different examples and stress that they do happen, that's normal, but also to be prudent about when you're planning to try to reduce that amount. So we look at ways of mitigating the risk of project failures or issues. So like anything else in life, you're going to have, issues and little hiccups, and the goal of this workshop is to kind of warn you. There are things that are out of our control, but at least if we can do in anything, our part and make sure that, we did our due diligence, then we're good to go. So some of the pitfalls that we actually cover in the workshop of how to avoid. So the first one is adequate planning. So this one again, this one comes with experience and good advice. But ideally, the better planning done, the better, right? So sometimes, you know, on hindsight, you look back at a project and you see that weakness and then you learn from that. So again, making sure that you have adequate planning. Look at reducing the scope creep and change orders. So as I mentioned earlier, it is a normal thing. So a change order, you know, right now, I'm going to give you an example. We are at the First Nation I'm employed. We are redoing part of the roof, and we have change orders. One of them is we need some extra lumber, and guess what? The lumber has tripled. So this again is out of our control. It's not a planning issue. We did not foresee the pandemic and we didn't foresee all this, but there are some things that you can prevent. I have an example where I work where we bought some prefab homes. We did the minimum water treatment for the wells, and now we have to upgrade that, and they're brand new. That was inadequate planning. Again, different staff, hopefully, and that's the other thing. We also look at documenting projects, not just for compliance, but to learn from. And when staff moves and quits or leaves or retires, that information, that expertise leaves with them. So if I'm there next time we're doing housing, I'm going to make sure that to ensure that the water treatment systems in these homes are not like minimal, that they're complete. So to avoid change orders. Other pitfalls, managing the lack of interest or velocity. Sometimes a project, they're always fairly long. They usually go into more than 1 year. That's another thing we talk about from a financial point of view. And from this point of view here, as a pitfall, is people sort of get like complacent about sometimes a project. So someone, which is the project manager, needs to ensure that the interest is still there, that the let's get going is still there. The big one we look at is maintaining communications. Everywhere, internally, externally. That is again another thing that really can cause you headaches. So we look at the different ways of maintaining proper or adequate communication. Productivity issues, resources and availability. Again, that kind of has to do also with the lack of interest. And it could be which it is right now, the pandemic, lack of resources. So that are out of your control. So again, we look at different ways to avoid pitfalls. Such, and then the other one is to have a skilled and cohesive project team. So you need someone in charge that can do the job, and if they have a team that they get along, because there will be hiccups, there will be challenges, as we just seen, and we need that team to be aware of that and know how to deal with that. For some First Nation, this is a big one, the cash flow. So again, we look at reporting on a timely basis. And we spent a lot of time on collecting and organizing records. This is for the audit. This is for council. This is for ISK. This is for many reasons. What to keep and for how long and so forth. So we covered that quite well. And then my last one was just, instead of actually, well, maybe I can, instead of actually looking at this story, I'll just tell you. There was in Ontario, and this is like a current case, where the company, and again, I've experienced something similar to this, so this is obviously not uncommon. So even though your project team is like really on the ball and everybody's doing their due diligence, and you're working with ISK, and ISK has their own engineers and they're approving everything, there still could be issues. And this is an example of a contractor who was cutting corners with First Nations in Ontario. And like another one that I'm familiar with, they don't just have one First Nation as a customer, they have more. So I think it's 6 in this instance. And this was going on, and everybody was approving these invoices, and it was going on. And as I read the article, and the reason I'm bringing this up is there was also signs or inkling from the First Nation, and that's what these 2 days are about, is not to not trust people, but to really double check things, ask around, because this contractor apparently was racist, was cutting corners, unknown amount of money they were paid, which makes no sense to me, but I wasn't part of it, so I don't know how they got away with that. ISK was signing off, they were getting paid. So this is a big issue right now in the news and with the government. So even though you do your best, you just never know. So again, this workshop is that to really pay attention to what's going on and do your due diligence. I feel like I've been talking like forever. So, do we have questions?
We do have one question in the chat box from Roy. He did point out that he did not say where he's from. Roy, I don't know if you want to jump in and say that, because
Yeah.
Yes. Nlakapmuk, from the Lytton First Nation. So we have about 2,800 membership in total, about 8 to 900 living on reserve. So my question was about like this, when is your next 2-day session? And does it count towards, I think it's a project management book of knowledge courses, might start taking it up. And we also use we inherited a project from the previous active manager. It's called Airtable, and I don't know, it's kind of awkward, and I'm still trying to get used to it. If you can help me out.
Yeah, I'm personally not familiar with it. As for the next workshop, no idea yet. That's an AFOA question that I can get an answer for. And then a credit towards, so far I have no answers, being honest here. A credit towards the, what was it, project?
PMBOK, it's project management book of knowledge.
Okay, I'll look into that. Don't have the answers yet.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Did I put everybody to sleep? Anyone? Come on, make me work. Or have a question I can answer. Nobody? Oh, that's not good. Someone's got to have some comment, question.
Well, while some of you may be hopefully thinking of something you want to ask Joanne about, I'd also like to remind everyone to please fill out evaluation forms and surveys, specifically about the session, because all feedback is always very helpful. It always helps us learn more and to be able to better deliver any and all workshops. So we always appreciate all feedback, good or bad. And those can be found on the Hoop app under surveys.
There are no other questions. Thank you for your time.
I think Roy might have something else.
Okay.
What's your success rate? I mean, not the success, but failure rate, I guess, you know. What happens if a project does fail?
I guess it fails for different reasons. So, and then again, defining what success and failure is, right? Well, I was doing research for examples, and I found this place, First Nation, where they did this water treatment, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, use this one, and then I keep reading, something catches me on Google, and I open it, and it was a water treatment plant, and it's built, I guess, in low land, and it flooded, so I thought that's not a good example. But again, you know, what is success and what is a failure? I mean, you know, do you have an example of where you're going with that?
Okay, so we have a sawmill. It's got really old machinery. It also has a large debt that we're trying to work off. We put a little bit of the budget towards it every year to bring that down. But like the price of lumber, you know, I mean, we're trying to reactivate the sawmill so we can repair our ditches. There's a lot of flume work and posts and beams to support the flumes. You know, but how do we dig ourselves out of the hole so we can actually buy some new machinery to try and generate a profit, sustainable, and employment, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's like more economic development than, unless you were building a new sawmill.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
But, you know, trying to go to chief and council for, you know, commitment to buy something new when we have a lot of work ahead of us just to break even. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this, if you have a sawmill, this is the time to be definitely to be producing your own lumber. But again, if the equipment's not up to par.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other, like, how often do your workshops come along? I'm not too sure. I am a member of the AFOA, but I don't follow all the calendars and stuff like that as closely as I should, I guess.
I think we had one, when did we have one? Over the winter we had one, so I think it's just the number of participants. So I'm going to check with the AFOA. I recommend that there's a number there or email and ask when the next one is, because the more people email, then the more they have enough people to advertise and run one. Right, so it's true that usually it's a pre-conference at the annual. So I've done this at our annual AFOA, and we haven't had those in a while. So we've been doing the annual AFOA conference virtually. So that's when it was done. But I think because of the situation, the AFOA is open to hosting it if they have a sufficient number of people. There's a question about considering funding for infrastructure for territorial planning. And again, I think we have someone in this group that is working for ISK, and I think that's more of an ISK question. I think it was Michael.
Hi, yes, this is Michael. I would, for this question, I would probably say it would be best to reach out to your local economic development officer specifically because of that. I know here in BC, the majority of funding you could receive through either the Community Opportunity Readiness Program or the LEDSP program. Most of it is for capacity development and stuff like that. So if you have planning and stuff like that, you would want to usually apply to ISK on that. And then when you would go to infrastructure for larger projects like the AFOA, that would be when you're ready to actually build out any of the actual buildings and stuff like that. So usually you would want to go to ISK beforehand to kind of do the planning, the kind of design work, and then when you're ready to kind of build out on those larger projects, you could move over to other programs for that. But again, it's really important that you check with your local economic development officer at ISK, because they'll have a lot of information on resources as well as local things that are going on. So
Yeah, maybe if I can, Joanne, just elaborate a little bit. I don't think it was necessarily like an application question for hard infrastructure like a building or sewer or water system or anything like that. One of the things I think we're disadvantaged with as First Nations is territorial planning, right? We have huge mining industries, energy projects, forest companies that have these infrastructural plans in place, right? And then they come to us at the 11th hour and they want us to sign off on a permit or a license. Well, I often think, well, it'd be nice if First Nations had their own forestry plan, their own mineral strategy, their own energy plan, tourism, whatever, park planning. That's the infrastructure I'm talking about. I'm not talking about hard water and sewer pipes. I'm talking those types of infrastructure. That's what I'm interested in.
And I think that's what he's saying. It's that LED's funding for that to get land plan usage and those types of policies. Because the one I'm doing, the 2-day one, is specifically for construction of buildings and so forth. For planning, that would definitely be lands and economic development, and they have funding for capacity and possibly policy development. And another thing too, sometimes when I do these workshops, I actually have someone from ISK that joins for whatever reason. So then we have them there to get, you know, to be able to ask specific questions, because I don't work for ISK. So when I do have someone like I do today, then I take advantage and try to get as much information as I can.
Would AFOA help in that type, like provide workshops and that type of infrastructure planning?
I don't think we do. What I always encourage people at the end of these sessions, how they evaluate the workshops, and somewhere along there must be a spot where you can suggest workshops you're interested in. Offhand, I can't think of any, but I think that's also a very interesting one to look at. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about that, even in general, like a before you actually start building stuff, we might have a need to develop a workshop for something like that. Any other questions, comments? Well, I thank you for your time. I teach accounting, so for a lot of people, this is very dry material, but I try to make it as exciting as I can, and I think it's through discussions, and it's always better in person to see the people, but on Zoom, you know, when you're talking, it's nice sometimes just to see that other person, and when you're doing the group work, a lot of the participants aren't as shy, and they put their camera on and there's a discussion, and I go in each room to see how breakout room to see how it's going, and I find people are really focused on these Zoom sessions compared to when we're in person, because when we're in person, we have groups in this big room. I'll have like one in every corner, and they're talking about like what they're going to have for dinner and what they did last night. And I find in these Zooms, for whatever reason, I pop in these, and the discussion's always really interesting. Then I'm like jealous that I can't stay in. I got to move to the next one. But yeah, so I think it can be interesting if everybody puts the effort in.
Right, so I think if there's no more questions, and we've only got a couple minutes left, but if there's no questions, we could probably wrap it up a little bit early. Everyone can take their health break and stretch your legs and get ready for the next workshop. And yeah, the AFOA Canada email's in there, or if you also have any more questions, you can reach out to us at AFOA BC. I've put our email in there as well. It's just reception@afoabc.org. And if we don't know the answer, we can definitely help you find the right people to connect to help you get you the answers that you need.
Thank you, everyone.